Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's 11th of August, 2022. Right, everyone, let's get into it. So the Görli merge is done. As you can see here, we had pandas on the screen pop up, as we usually do on the live stream. Hopefully you guys were able to watch that or kind of like tune in there on the Bankless YouTube. If you didn't, you can go give it a replay there. But it was fun. I mean, it was just like the other kind of live streams of Robson and Sepolia ones. But that's it. That's the public testnet's done. Now we wait for a mainnet TTD to be proposed, which could happen on the consensus call, which I believe is happening today, or the all-core devs call next week. There is already a document floating around. I don't have it handy right now, but it's a short document that basically proposes a bunch of dates or a bunch of TTDs and dates attached to that based on hash power changes on the network. And I discussed this yesterday, so I'm not going to rehash that here. But yeah, let's look at what happened with Goerli. So basically, it was a bit messier than, I guess, Sepolia and Robson in terms of kind of what happened exactly. And there hasn't been any post-mortems yet. I'm literally recording the refuel only a few hours after, I guess, like Goerli went live. I think, if I can doing my math correctly, it's about 7 hours later. And I'm recording it earlier today because I'm actually going to be doing something else later tonight, so I'm recording the refuel a bit earlier, but basically you can see here on the Görli Beacon Chain website that participation is quite low, and I guess we are finalizing. As you can see here, Marius said that we are finalizing, and there was a bit of instability or confusion on the network because of two different terminal blocks and lots of non-updated nodes, so we didn't finalize earlier. So finalization happens roughly every 12 minutes on the network, and we didn't finalize earlier because of that kind of like that confusion on the network there. Now, you can see here that participation rate right now is about 70, anywhere from kind of, I guess, like 70 to 75%, and there's kind of like a few slots or blocks being missed here. The Beacon Chain website has also been a bit buggy today. You can see here that they're not kind of like looking at the most recent blocks and not looking at the most recent epics either. So yeah, basically don't take these sites as gospel when looking at them. Really, the only thing that's going to give you the current state of the network is going to be your own node, right? If you're running your own node and running your own validator, that's going to give you the current kind of state there. And there's also this visualization that people like to look at, which I think is pretty cool. It just shows kind of like the blocks and, I guess, slots, as they're called, on the Beacon Chain here, and the kind of like finalization percentage here. So why is this happening? Well, I mean, the same reason as it happens on other testnets. People don't update their software. Their software can't it is misconfigured, right? The Beacon Chain website itself may be, I guess, like throwing up errors as well. And I think the main difference between kind of like what happened with the Sepolia and Robson merge and the Goerli merge is that Sepolia and Robson were proof of work networks, whereas Goerli is a proof of authority network running something called Clique, which is a custom, I guess, like consensus mechanism on there. So bit different behavior, I guess, like was to be expected here, but the merge transition still happened at TTD, and the network is slowly recovering here. And it's only, as I said, it's only been a few hours. It's not like it has been a very long time here, and we should get kind of, I guess, like a recap of what happened from the core devs eventually. But yeah, I mean, even though it was messier than prior testnets, I don't know, I look at this and I'm just like, this just, I mean, even if this happened on kind of like mainnet, it would have healed itself very, very quickly. But obviously on testnet, there's no real incentivization to get your validators up and running, or to update your stuff, or to make sure that you're running fine, because you're not losing any money. And you can easily troll kind of like these testnets, because say you had a lot of Go Ethereum or Goeth or GETH or Görli-eth, right? Say you had a lot of that, you could just send it to the deposit contract, generate all these kind of like all these new validators, and never spin the validators up. There's a lot of people who had a lot of GETH and just basically wanted to troll kind of like the network, and they could, and that would mean that until kind of, I guess, like those validators get leaked out, we would have this lower participation here. So there's any number of reasons. Can that happen on mainnet? I mean, technically it can, but like you can imagine people scrambling to fix their validators very, very quickly if it's misconfigured, if it goes offline for whatever reason, or if it loses, I guess, like touch with the network for whatever reason, because they're losing money if they don't. So look, if I had to kind of like give an assumption here, and maybe this is a dangerous assumption to make, I don't know if dangerous is the right word. Maybe it's a bit of a a kind of like an assumption, a low chance assumption here. But I would say that we're probably going to see something like this during the mainnet kind of like transition. I don't think we're going to see, 30%, 40% of the network being offline or kind of like not voting and their validators needing to kind of like update or being misconfigured. But there will be some percentage like that for sure. Like there's no way that we're going to get all the validators updated, from the get-go. There will be for sure some people who forget to update, who weren't paying attention, or who updated incorrectly, misconfigured, whatever. Now, do I believe that's going to be a showstopper? No, not at all. I believe it'll kind of like heal itself very, very quickly. I believe the chain will be fine. I even believe it'll be finalizing within the first epoch on the on the mainnet merge. So yeah, I don't know. Like I look at these things. I know some people kind of like sometimes have a go at me and say, "Oh, you're just sugarcoating things." I don't think so. I think I'm trying to look at it as objectively as I can, and I don't see anything in what happened with Görli today, even though it was messier than prior testnets. I don't see anything that happened today that screams out to me that we need to kind of like test more, that we could have done more here. There's not really anything that could be done. I mean, at the end of the day, we can put all the information out there, but if the people running the validators aren't configuring them correctly or aren't kind of like updating correctly, well, that's on them. Like, some people will kind of like hit back at me when I say this, but basically being a validator on the network, being a solo validator or being a validator in general comes with a responsibility. The responsibility to keep your software up to date and make sure that it's configured correctly. Now, can we make it as easy as possible for people to do that? Of course we can, right? We can give them plenty of notice as well. But at the end of the day, like we can't force them. Like we can't go into their computers and do it for them. Like at the end of the day, it's the entity's responsibility to do it themselves. So that's my kind of like view on that. But as I said, we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer for a proper overview of what happened to come out from the technical side of things, but it seems like the network is finalizing just fine. I've read some comments, people running nodes on the network saying it's finalizing because the Beacon Chain website isn't up to date right now. But yeah, seems the kind of like network has fixed itself up there, which is very, very cool to see. And if you want to keep, on top of the, post-mortem here and kind of like read from the voices that you are kind of like getting the most knowledge from, there is a list from Superphiz here of accounts you should be following on Twitter. Highly recommend following each of these people, of course. Tim Byko, Danny Ryan, Parathosh, Vitalik, and Ben Edgington here. Definitely go follow all of them to keep up to date of what's happening there. Now, as I said, next step is mainnet merge. Like we're there, guys. Like we're only a few weeks away. In terms of TTD, there might be kind of like some soft discussions about TTD on the consensus call. I'm not convinced that they're going to set one on that call. We'll have to see. But if they don't, it'll definitely be on the all core devs call next week. So we're about kind of like we're in a week, within a week or 8 or 9 days of getting a TTD. So within the next 8 or 9 days, if we don't get it today, we'll get it on the all core devs call, and then we'll know a kind of like timeline. And I don't think the timeline's going to differ from what we've kind of expected in the past, like the week of September 19th, but it really does depend on hash power changes leading up to the merge. That'll make it happen, quicker or slower or anything like that. So we're going to have to kind of monitor that as well. But yeah, that's the recap of what happened with Görli today as far as I can tell, as I said, it's only been a few hours since it happened. So there's not that much information for me to go off just yet, but I'm sure there'll be more coming out over the next 24 hours, and I'll be sure to cover any of that on tomorrow's refuel. But anyway, moving on from the merge stuff onto some other interesting updates from today. So Seth Hartland here, who is the global head of policy at Ledger, put together a really great thread about the Tornado Cash sanctions here. I highly recommend giving this a read, but basically the TLDR of the thread is that this is the first time the kind of like US Treasury Department has sanctioned code instead of kind of like a person or a corporation. So they've actually sanctioned open source code. And obviously with that comes a lot of kind of scary things, because if they're going to sanction Tornado Cash and kind of like say, okay, well, we're not above sanctioning open source code, then that means like any code is fair game. They could literally, if they wanted to, they could sanction the entire Bitcoin network. They could sanction the entire Ethereum network. And basically, I mean, this is the thing with these kind of like powers that are really, really strong powers that don't require a lot of, I guess, like sign off for them to be enacted because they're, I guess, like quote unquote wartime powers, right? The problem is that in theory, they could sanction Ethereum and Bitcoin. And what do you think is going to happen to all the centralized exchanges and all the centralized services that are supporting these networks, right? By law, right, they're going to have to stop supporting them immediately or else be at risk of kind of like paying massive fines or being held criminally liable for it and going to jail for that. So, like, that's I guess, like, probably the worst case scenario is if the US government wanted to sanction the Ethereum network itself, right? Like, that would be the worst case scenario. How do we defend against this? Well, I mean, it's hard because you have to basically go to court to defend against this. You have to basically prove in a court of law that what the Treasury Department is doing by sanctioning the Ethereum network doesn't actually fit the letter of the law, and in the US specifically, it doesn't fit with the constitutional rights that the citizens have. So what would, I guess, like, it'd be kind of like wild to see what would happen, but immediately the US-based entities would have to stop supporting the Ethereum, the network, right? So what about the foreign entities? Well, it depends on where they are, because there are obviously a lot of countries that have extradition treaties with the US, and it depends how far the US wants to go with this, right? Would they kind of lean on their allies and say, hey, this company is based in your jurisdiction, we have sanctions on Ethereum, and they're supporting Ethereum, we want you to put a stop to this. And of course they're going to put a stop to it. So it's kind of like, it's not just about Tornado Cash. Like, that's why when people kind of like speak up about this on Twitter and say, well, it's, Tornado Cash is enabling kind of criminal activity, it makes sense for them to get sanctioned. It's not about that at all. It's about sanctioning literally open source code. I mean, and code is speech in the US. I believe there's a court case that kind of set this precedent. But basically, as I said, that opens the door to any piece of code being sanctioned and any piece of code being basically made to interact with it being illegal. Could you imagine them sanctioning any of the code that runs the internet? Like that's the kind of thing here that they're doing. And I think when taking that view, it gets scary. It gets frustrating because, as I said, there's not that much you can do in this case. You have to literally just take the US government to court over this and the Treasury Department to court over this, from my understanding, because and just kind of like hope that, maybe not hope, but like kind of like present a strong argument and hope that you kind of like win the case. But on top of that, it feels like a very uphill battle, right? Because you're up against like the US government itself, and building decentralized tools and Ethereum. I mean, okay, let me take a step back here. I'm rambling a little bit here, but I'm trying to collect my thoughts here on this one and trying to explain myself as best as I can. But, just because they sanction Ethereum doesn't mean Ethereum stops working. I mean, I'm sure validators within, I guess, like the network, post-merge, if they're in the US, they'd probably, especially the centralized kind of like services and companies running validators, they'd probably have to shut them down, right? So it would hurt the network that way. But in terms of kind of like Ethereum itself and its decentralization, it would remain decentralized. You would still technically be able to use the Ethereum network, right? But if you're a US citizen, you'd be breaking the law by doing that if they sanctioned Ethereum itself. But that's the thing, like these sanctions, they wouldn't really stop Ethereum or Bitcoin or any kind of like decentralized crypto network, right? But they would essentially stop all the support from the centralized entities. So I don't even know I don't even want to think about what would happen in that scenario. It'd be a very dark day for it. And this is the thing, right? You would probably have people in the I guess non-crypto circles cheering this on, saying, "Oh well, all crypto was good for was scams and money laundering and NFT scams and all this sorts of stuff," not realizing that the power being kind of, I guess, used here is kind of like massive overreach from the US government itself. And I guess it kind of like pays to pay more, pay more attention to this sort of stuff rather than having emotional reactions to it. And it's funny because, you might think, oh, well, as long as they go after these kind of like things that I don't like, it's fine. But it's not about what you do and don't like. It's about the fact that sanctioning code is just really bizarre and really kind of like weird, because it's basically sanctioning speech, at least from the US-centric point of view here. So it remains to be seen kind of like if this is going to be challenged in court and who it's going to be challenged in court by, the Tornado Cash sanctions. I don't know if the US government would go as far as kind of like sanctioning the Ethereum network itself or sanctioning the Bitcoin network itself. But the thing is that they have the power to do that, and that's the scary thing, is that they have the power to do that. They have the power to instantly force every single entity, whether that be an individual or company within the US, to stop kind of like using and supporting Ethereum, because those powers that they're using and kind of like the punishments that they have there are so harsh. I mean, up to 30 years in prison if they want, if you break the law there, and if they can kind of like take you to court over that and get you sentence, as well as massive fines, like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fines. And obviously this is being done because those sanctions are usually put on hostile nation states, and they're usually put in place for reasons that we saw obviously with the recent Ukraine-Russia conflict and stuff like that. But when you start sanctioning open source code, when you start sanctioning the kind of like literal tools that people can use to do good or bad things, that's when it gets into very, very murky waters, at least from my kind of like point of view. And I think from any logical and sane person's point of view anyway, like I don't think there's any sane way to say that what the US government did here was actually good for humanity as a whole. I don't think it is at all. I think what they've done is very, very bad, and I hope that they kind of like change course here, or at least remove the sanctions from Tornado Cash without having to go through a whole lengthy court process, because that's going to take years. It's not an overnight process. We'll have to see how that shakes out over the next kind of like, I guess, few months, maybe even years from here. As I said the other day, it's a sad day in crypto that this happened, and it kind of like gives something that hangs over our head now of, what else is the US government going to sanction? Are they going to go after privacy coins like Monero and Zcash? I mean, maybe they will, right? I mean, will they go after other privacy solutions on Ethereum like Aztec and Phonon Network and other such things? Who knows? We'll have to see how that kind of plays out there. But yeah, definitely give this thread from Seth a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, on to the next thing from today. We have a really interesting tweet here from Cassie, who is an investment partner at Paradigm. So this is basically a new website called guzzlers.wtf, and she's posted a little thread here with a visualization of how, I guess, like the Ethereum, gas in Ethereum has been used over time. So on the left-hand side here, the axis is the percentage of gas consumed, and on the bottom you have the dates, or I guess like the years. Now you can see how this has evolved significantly over time. 0x actually accounted for a lot of the gas consumed on Ethereum for quite a while here, for basically all of 2018, and it was basically, I guess, like half in 2019, and then its market share has gone down considerably in terms of percentage of total gas consumed. And then you can see that throughout time as well, Maker got big at one period of time, I guess during 2019, 2018, 2019, Tether as well. And then you had, I guess, DeFiSaver completely break out, and Uniswap just became this dominant force. And I think that's also got to do a lot with MEV. You can see on the bottom here, there's an MEV searcher that popped up as well. So DeFiSaver really kicked off Uniswap's dominance and kicked off, I guess, like the whole MEV story that we're used to. And then you can see the network isn't really dominated by one entity. Uniswap accounts for a lot of the gas being used, but it's not like back in the day where 0x was basically 100% of the network. And then, MakerDAO ate into 0x a bit with a bunch of others below that you can see on the chart. But really, these days, it seems very diverse. And this is Ethereum Layer 1. It's obviously not counting the Layer 2 networks, but it's still interesting nonetheless. And you can see that OpenSea was, basically didn't even register until the end of 2021, and then in 2022, where they started kind of like, where the NFT bull market really started in earnest as well. And then, there's a bunch of other apps here as well that kind of like register and are labeled. So I think this is a really cool new website and tool. I love these sorts of stuff. And as I said, you can go to guzzlers.wtf and kind of play with the data yourself. And I guess like it's got a better kind of a better access here with better kind of like timelines. You can get a more granular view, and then you can kind of go down to the raw values as well down here. And this data, I believe, is coming from the Nansen.ai service. So yeah, I think the most interesting thing about this kind of chart for me is just how significant the Ethereum network has evolved over just a relatively short period of time, right? And how you can basically pinpoint different events. Like you can literally see DeFiSaver in this, right? Like right there on kind of like early to mid 2020 was the beginnings of DeFiSaver, and you can see Uniswap just absolutely take off, right? Because Uniswap was obviously one of the big beneficiaries because everyone was trading DeFi tokens, everyone was yield farming, and it was all through Uniswap. And you can see that Compound was the first liquidity mining, or I guess the first big liquidity mining app to go to do, sorry, the first big app to do liquidity mining in DeFi Summer. And then Synthetics as well had done it earlier, and you can see their market share growing too. You can see Wrapped Ether grow significantly as well from what it was, because of the fact that you needed to wrap your ETH to put it into DeFi protocols. And then you can see other DeFi protocols like Curve and obviously SushiSwap and obviously kind of like Balancer, 1inch, and Aave as well kind of start taking up more percentage of the network there in terms of gas fees. But I think it's really interesting, this MEV searcher kind of like story, because that really didn't even register until the start of DeFi Summer. So before that, there wasn't really any MEV to extract. And MEV was a very, very limited thing, was extremely specialized. It wasn't something that people were doing very much of. But then with DeFi Summer came a lot more opportunity to extract MEV from people, and that's continued until this day. And you can see MEV searcher still accounts for not a large part of the network, but still accounts for a decent part of the percentage of gas consumed here as well, which is a very, very interesting story. But yeah, that Uniswap dominance is just crazy to me. I mean, what's the percentage there? Does a website tell me? I'd just love to know the exact percentage of what Uniswap's dominance is today. Yeah, it's about 37% of Uniswap. And, it was only 6% in May 2020. And then by September 2020, the end of DeFi Summer, it was 35%. So almost a kind of like massive increase here from 6% kind of like market share to 36% market share over the course of DeFi Summer. And that hasn't gone back down either. Like Uniswap has basically, it was like 35.7% here in September 2020. And then you go all the way to May 2022 and it's 37%. So it hasn't really, in terms of like total gas consumed, hasn't gone up very much, but it has maintained that dominance. And also Uniswap is on other networks like L2s and other kind of like EVM chains as well. So that's not counted here, of course. But yeah, that's just a very interesting story, and I think that it was worth highlighting. So you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so DeFiSaver now has DeFiSaver's automation tools for Aave v3 on Arbitrum are now live. So you can enable trustless liquidation protection for your Aave position and know it will be protected while you get a good night's sleep or enjoy a few days away from a keyboard and keys. Now, obviously, you guys know my view on leverage, but like just generally, people are always going to do their own thing with leverage, so I'm not going to harp on about that here. But if you do have, funds borrowed on Aave on Arbitrum, and you don't want to be liquidated and you want to be kind of like alerted, or kind of like you want your position to be saved in case of liquidation, well, you can use DeFiSaver for that. Now, DeFiSaver is live on Optimism and Ethereum mainnet as well. So you have various options here of kind of like using this tool. And I think it's a really cool tool. I've used it before when I had like maker positions open. And the thing is that even though you've got like a position open on one of these money markets, it doesn't mean that you're taking leverage out. Like for my maker positions, I usually borrowed stables and didn't buy ETH with it. I was doing something else with it. And then I'd repay the stables at a later date. And obviously, because I'm collateralizing, I have a liquidation price, and I used DeFiSaver to make sure that I was alerted if there was a kind of like massive move there, because obviously I didn't want to be liquidated. But I did have a very, very low liquidation price. As I said, I wasn't degen leverage trading ETH or anything like that. So it wasn't that big of a concern, but it was still a concern. And I think for people that use these tools for leverage trading ETH, you should definitely check out DeFiSaver. And I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so speaking of Optimism, actually, they've got now a new video here from Ori, who works at Optimism Labs, to explain Optimism in the simplest of terms. So this is on YouTube. You can check this out. Just wanted to highlight this for you guys because I know that there's still a lot of confusion around layer 2s. I do my best to try and explain it, but I know that the way I explain it, I pretty much... Like, unless you're listening to the refuel all the time, unless you've actually kind of like got a basic understanding of layer 2s, I tend to skip over the fundamentals of them, and you may get confused because of that. So this video should get you up to speed because it's basically titled Optimism for non-techies. I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to hopefully get around to watching it soon. But basically, I'm seeing a lot of confusion still around layer 2s, around things like, how censorship resistant they are, why they centralized today, where the funds are actually stored, how they how the layer 2 bridges, the official bridges, differ from third-party bridges and all that sorts of stuff. I don't know if all of that will be touched on in this video, but in terms of like fundamentally understanding how Optimism works and how layer 2s generally work, this video should be a good one for you. So you can definitely check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Polynomial Protocol announced today the launch of the next generation of earn vaults on Optimism. So these are built on top of Lyra and synthetics, and you can go to earn.polynomial.fi to check these out. So 4 months ago, Polynomial launched earn vaults, and I believe I covered it on the Refuel, which were the first ever fully on-chain option vaults. And now they're live with today they're live with the SETH call selling and SETH put selling vaults on Optimism's mainnet and dynamic DeFi option vaults. With Earn Vaults V2, it introduces dynamic option vaults with partial collateralization, ERC20 tokenized vaults, near instant deposits and withdrawals, and multiple strikes across multiple expiries. So as the vaults are experimental, there is a cap on them as well. I believe that cap has been there from the beginning too. But you can read the rest of the thread for more details on this here. But yeah, I know a lot of you have become interested in options over the last few months. I see you talking about it in the Discord channel, and you're using kind of like centralized exchanges and stuff like that. Well, this is a protocol that may be interesting to you if you want to kind of go check out some options on here and do them on Optimism, powered by two really other great products, Lyra and synthetics here. And it's funny, I started noticing people in the Discord channel talk about options after the Hal Press Bankless interview, because on there he was talking about the options that he had kind of like bought. I think there were some kind of like call options that he bought with expiries in, I think one was in December, and I think it was like a $5,000 or $6,000 strike or something like that. And the way it would work is that you would have like the right to buy the ETH at a lower price if the strike was hit. That's kind of like my understanding of it. And everyone was like, oh, I'm super bullish on ETH. I'm going to buy these and this is going to be awesome. And then I believe ETH came down a lot, and then everyone's like, because if the strike price isn't hit, they kind of like expire worthless, which means that they're just literally worthless and you spent money on nothing. So you really need to understand how options work and understand what you're getting yourself into. But if you do, then yeah, definitely check out Polynomial Protocol here. It's another one that you might be interested in. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. Finally, here we have some metrics out of CowSwap. So yesterday, Cow Protocol smashed another new record. The protocol handled more than $100 million in volume, giving it a 26% market share in the aggregator space. This is pretty cool. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is because I know I've been bearish on, aggregators before, in terms of decentralized exchange aggregators, because I think that something like a Uniswap, their brand awareness and everything is just really, really strong. But CowSwap is not your regular aggregator, right? They are an MEV resistant aggregator. They try to make sure that you're not getting wrecked by MEV, or that you're not getting kind of sandwich attacked or any of that sorts of stuff. In that kind of like respect, or in that kind of like vein, I actually think that something like an MEV resistant aggregator could be very, very popular and could actually attain a large market share. The market share in this chart is just comparing them against other aggregators. I'd like to see them compared against, the actual decentralized exchanges themselves, which I'm sure there is a dashboard for that, but I just don't have it handy. But I just wanted to kind of like, retouch on the things that I've said in the past, because the reason why I've been kind of like bearish on these aggregators is, as I said, like I feel like it's all about brand awareness when it comes to decentralized exchanges generally, and it's all about kind of like obviously liquidity and stickiness and stuff like that. But people were bullish on aggregators because they were like, well, these aggregators get you the best price from kind of like all these other dexes, all these other liquidity pools that exist on Ethereum. Why wouldn't you use it? Well, the reason why you wouldn't use it is simply because you don't know about it. And there's plenty of people who have absolutely no idea about these aggregators. And they're just coming in and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to use Uniswap because Uniswap has such strong brand awareness and has such a strong presence. It's basically everywhere. So they just use the Uniswap interface instead of using an aggregator. So when it comes to, like attaining market share in this space, I think one, obviously there's awareness, which CowSwap seems to be getting more and more of, but also having a unique kind of a feature here for the power users, which is the kind of like MEV resistant trades, and making sure that you can kind of like prevent yourself from losing money to MEV. So yeah, just wanted to make a little comment on that there. You can check this out, this kind of like chart. I don't know if they've linked the Do Not Analytics dashboard. No, they haven't, but I guess you can check out the chart if you're listening to the podcast. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below, but that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.